There's no, just to point out that, like, this is, at this point, we've put this to bed, right? No matter how much people say, like, well, the Belt and Road Initiative is also Chinese imperialism. Like, how do you not recognize that? And the attitude that people have demonstrated against China engaging in any sort of development initiatives, doing any sort of soft power stuff around the globe has now been put to bed. Foreign Policy Magazine and many other like overtly right-wing pro-empire think tanks have recognized that the debt trap that the IMF and the World Bank have offered the global south is no longer competitive now that the Chinese market, now that there's a new game in town, where a lot of these people can personally get infinitely more favorable loans with a lot better conditions from the Chinese government. Something that even those who have a vested interest in the continuation of American empire have come to terms with and want the IMF and World Bank to change its ways.
Sees this potential deal happening between Greenland and China and hates it. Greenland, this place that is so strategically located, that is right next to the United States, that is really a huge part of the future of global influence in the Arctic, suddenly in debt to China? No. In fact, the Pentagon freaked out and was like, what if Greenland defaults on their payments to China and China seizes the airports and starts using it for their military? A little bit of an alarmist, like, doomsday scenario. It's true. Like, when you owe someone money, they have leverage over you. The U.S. did not like this. So the U.S. goes to Denmark and
It is very much like projection, I think, to run with that attitude. So far, it has not happened, right? So far, it has not happened. And that is the American position. It's like, well, they will do to us what we've done to them, which is a common perspective throughout history. Slave-owning whites in the antebellum thought that if black people were liberated, that they would enslave white people, that they would enact violence and vengeance against their former masters. Now, history has shown that it's usually those who had the power that seek to continue that domination, to continue to restore the racial pecking order. That's why you have the Ku Klux Klan, and that's what happened in the Reconstruction era. And yet, this is a commonly shared opinion. This is something that Americans broadly believe as well, which is that if China became the dominant hegemonic superpower, they would do to us what we have done to the global south and what we've done to China historically. If they do defaults on payments, what do you think China would do in response? Well, we don't actually have to assume what would happen in this hypothetical. It has happened many times over. China has engaged in loan forgiveness virtually every single time. Here, this is Voice of America News. Like, this is directly coming from the CIA. China cancels 23 loans to Africa amid debt trap debate. It forgave 23 of the 17 loans that it had given to African countries. And the American cope on that front was, it's because they want to still do debt trap stuff, but they just don't want Americans to be. They just don't want America to know that they're doing debt trap stuff. I think part of the reason why they're doing this is because they also want to create secondary markets. They want to keep selling to Africa, and in order to keep selling to Africa, they need to develop Africa, recognizing that there is a need to develop Africa, the African continent. It's still ultimately self-interested, and it's certainly not a consequence of like some kind of ideological play. They forgave the debts but build military naval bases. Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that, because I think the Chinese military base developed in the African continent is literally minuscule in comparison. How many fucking military bases America has in Africa? What are you talking about? There's like what? How many bases exist? How many Chinese bases exist overseas? Yeah, they built their first ever overseas military naval base in Djibouti in 2017 on 2020, which is if you've watched enough YouTube foreign policy videos, you understand the significance of Djibouti, where there is also obviously a U.S. base as well. The reason for that is because of its access point into the Red Sea. If you watched a single foreign policy map-based YouTube autism account, you already know the real life lore and
tells them to kill the deal. Denmark does it. They agree. And suddenly...
Yeah, America has 800 confirmed military bases, like out in broad daylight. So China's literally has no motivations outside of helping people and is completely magnanimous. Did I point to where I said the exact opposite? I said that it's still self-interest. I didn't say that at all. I said the exact opposite. I said that it's still self. They're not even contrary to like the way that the USSR operated foreign policy, where there was at least some like ideological through line. China doesn't even have that. They're not like operating at the behest, implementing global socialism either. There is no investment in that regard. It is simply leverage against America's crumbling hegemonic. And the other reason I think, and this is suspicion, this is speculation, is because they want to develop secondary markets that they can sell. Not only are they utilizing America's dominant and colonial history to their advantage as a much more favorable, they also, like, America has been the dominant force on the since even before the end of the USSR, but certainly after, right? And in that dominance, in that I think Western superpowers have grown and have also increased the cruelty in the ways that they subject people into debt. Now that there is a competitive superpower, that competitive superpower can basically leverage America's pre-cruel conditions to their